We're going to talk about participative and local democracy, citizenry at the center of public decision making. That's going to be the presentation that we're going to have today. We're going to have Aline Muylaert and Wietse van Ransbeeck. I'm sorry if I mispronounce your names. That allows countries to give a voice on the subjects that matter. We're going to have Oscar Espiritu Santo in charge of the interview. Oscar is a friend of our it's a friend, and he's been teaching in the journalism school of Malaga. Thank you very much, Valeria. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Once again, it's a pleasure to see your faces here in this wonderful event.
What about your Spanish? His Spanish is very good. I don't know, what about you?
Poquito.
Poquito. You have to improve your Spanish. Don't worry about it. Vamos a empezar con esta pareja que ya ha presentado.
We're going to start with Wietse and Aline. Valeria already introduced them. Probably the best European couple of entrepreneurs. They developed a project that we're going to talk about right now. And we're going to start by showing a very brief video. Then we will talk more about the project. Video, please.
Locales en todo el mundo, que ha transformado la toma de decisiones gubernamentales, ayudando a construir democracias locales más fuertes, inclusivas y participativas. Además, Aline es miembro de la Junta Directiva de Belcham, la Cámara de Comercio belga-estadounidense, desde donde promueve la conexión y el intercambio transatlántico entre Bélgica y Estados Unidos. Ha sido reconocida internacionalmente por Forbes como una de las
creo que no es este, nos hemos equivocado, pero da lo mismo.
Y ha recibido el premio Inspiring 50 Belgium, destacándose como una de las mejores líderes en tecnología en Bélgica. También ha sido galardonada con el Etion Leadership Award, posicionándose como líder en el emprendimiento socialmente responsable.
Vale, perfecto, era otro.
This wasn't the right video, but it's okay.
Tell about CitizenLab. CitizenLab, how works CitizenLab?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for hosting us. It's a really pleasure to be here. So CitizenLab, as you would have seen in the video, I'll kind of give you a bit of what you would see in the video. We are a citizen participation platform that helps local communities, local governments connect with their residents to give them a direct say in the local policy making. So we are originally from Belgium, both of us. We started in Belgium, but by now we are working with over 500 mainly cities internationally on digital democracy and on participatory democracy. So we're a B Corp organization. I would call ourselves like a social profit organization. We are for-profit, but with a clear social purpose. Yeah, on how it works. So it's a platform that we have developed, a digital platform that allows residents to go online and actually participate in local projects and in local decisions. So that can range from mobility to strategic plans to participatory budgets, or even more bottom-up proposals. And then also we work with the government to then, with that input, get to a better understanding of what are the diverse opinions within the community. So that's a bit in a nutshell how CitizenLab works.
Okay, perfect. You are very young, both of you, but how come the idea to, what did you do before? And how comes the idea to found CitizenLab?
We didn't do much before professionally, so we started 9 years ago when we were still studying. So we studied together in Brussels, and we had ideas for our neighborhoods. But then we found out that it was actually really difficult to reach out to the local government. You had to or attend a meeting or write something on paper or an email. And we thought, okay, we're using our phones, we're using technology, why not build something to kind of allow for that interaction and to have citizens share ideas. And it just kind of started as a little project to see if there was any interest, but then quickly we found out that cities were actually looking for these tools, and then it kind of took off and we had our first cities using it. So we started as students, and then it quickly developed.
And I want to maybe add to that just on the bigger picture, so there is this effective altruism movement, and there is this framework called 80,000 hours, and it's basically about, how can we do good better? How can we spend our career in the most meaningful way? And they have developed this framework that they look at problems, or they guide people in finding the problems that they should work on. And they have 3 criteria for that. You should work on problems that are big, that are solvable, and that are neglected. And I think what also for us was really interesting at the start working on CitizenLab is working in government 8 years ago, or with government, especially as a technology company, it was hugely neglected. Nobody was doing that. But if you think about it, the decisions that our governments make, they affect millions and billions of people. So that was also for us a motivation to get started and really have an impact on the democratic model, which should go beyond just like the act of going to the ballot box every 5-6 years. So that was also like part of the motivation.
Okay, I know that the platform is for the governments, your client is the governments, but how the citizens use this tool and what kind of ideas share in this place, in this platform?
So we always work with local governments. So the local governments are the clients, but also our partners. So together we as a company develop the technology, but we also have people supporting the governments in implementing it. So together we put the platform, the website online. Of course, communication is very key. They need to, citizens need to know that it exists, so it needs to be integrated in their communication channels, so that, they find their way to the platform. But I think there are like 4 big topics we work on. The first one is everything that has to do more with strategy and participatory budgeting. So Wietse already talked about it, but big strategic plans. For example, if there's just a new local government elected, like what are your dreams for the next X years? The next one is everything with mobility and infrastructure. So that's always a very hot topic. You reach a lot of people if you talk about mobility, because everyone it impacts people's lives daily. Then you have climate and environment, and then the last one is more everything to do with neighborhoods and communities. So those are like the 4 kind of big topics that we work on a daily basis.
And to add to that, so there is actually you could say for residents, a top-down way of participating and a more bottom-up. So it's a platform, a digital platform, that is run by the local government, and so they will have their projects on there, the ones that Aline described. But then, and so that is the more top-down way. As a government, I'm working on this and that and that, and you can have your say through different tools. So that can be through like collecting ideas, proposals, votes, deliberation, commenting, so different methods. But then you also have a bottom-up way of participating, which we call proposals. So basically, you can also propose your ideas or your initiative to your local council, and then you have to get a minimum number of votes. Almost every country has that, and as soon as you hit that number of votes, it goes to council and it gets discussed. So that is a very effective way to actually set the agenda and to also decide as a resident, as a citizen, on what actually the government should be talking about with the community and have discussions on new proposals.
Okay, you are in Brussels right now. Probably the local governments over there are using your tool, but there are more governments using this tool. Which ones?
So we are now working in about 15 different countries, mainly Western Europe and the Americas. I say the Americas because both in North America, in the United States, but also in Chile, for instance, and in Peru. And it goes really from, it's mainly local governments, so it goes from large cities such as in Europe, a city of Vienna, a city of, so tons of London boroughs, the city of Riga and Dublin, and then in the United States, Seattle, for instance, but also up to like really small towns. So there's a good variety. And maybe to give you a couple of examples of cities, so we can both kind of share two maybe. So one example, so we already talked a bit about the idea of participatory budgeting, and I think that is a pretty effective way of implementing participatory democracy locally. How does that work for anyone who's not familiar with it? Basically, it's a percentage of the total budget that a city allocates to community projects. So it can be between 1 and 2% typically. So for instance, in the city of Ghent in Belgium, they had like a participatory budget of 6 million. And or the London Borough of Newham, they had a participatory budget of 2 million each year. And what they do is basically those funds can be allocated to ideas from the bottom up, projects that are developed by the residents. In the London Borough of Newham, they had more than 10,000 people actually participating in that, so that is pretty huge. And they developed 300 projects together with council, brought it to implementation, on really very local projects, on within the neighborhoods. So it is always very local, action-oriented. So that is one example. Another example would be in Chile, the city of Viña del Mar. They, as you might know, I mean, the previous speaker was from Chile. As you might know, there were wildfires I believe in February or at the start of the year. And so they are now using the platform to redevelop those public spaces that are gone or were devastated, to kind of repurpose those spaces, reinvent those spaces. So I think it's also a powerful example of how the community and the community force can be used to reimagine public space.
Yeah, and I think what's maybe what's important to add is these things were already happening before there was technology, but I think what we are trying to do is increase the reach, so there's more people that can participate, but then also influence how the decisions are made, so people can like directly vote on proposals and in that way influence which projects will be implemented. So we're talking about a much bigger reach and a much direct say on which decisions are made.
Okay, talking about the democracies that you are talking right now, what are the challenges for the governments and the citizens when you are trying to implement these kind of tools? And these kind of tools could be make better democracies, or no? What do you think about it?
So I think we can give by now many examples of like really good implementations at the local level. We had over 1 million people that way actively participate in their local democracy and had a very tangible impact in local projects. The challenge is bringing that to a higher level and going from what I would call low politics to high politics. Low politics about, hey, let's redesign a park. Very effective because it's, I mean, quality of living, it's a park you might go to daily, so to speak. But the challenge is how do we bring that to like the biggest topics, the national topics, the international topics on climate policy, migration policy, the more so-called wicked issues where you need way more deliberation. That is, I feel, where digital democracy hasn't really fully fulfilled its promises yet. So just to say that at a local level, I think we have kind of a very strong model so far, but now getting it to that higher level, in order to do that, we also need that political will, and that is often like one of the challenges is when we initially started, we thought of ourselves as a technology company and a technology organization, but we have started to see that actually the technology is a bit like a Trojan horse. It's a way to get people to talk about participatory democracy and implement it, but what's way more important is the so-called culture of participation and culture of democracy they shape around it. And we see 3 key pillars to develop that when we start with a government. The first one is you need political will and a political vision, so you need a very clear mandate, because we have seen examples when that mandate is not there, you know, it's just window dressing. So you need a very clear commitment. Before we start working with the government, we always ask for that clear commitment, and we make sure that council members or political leaders are part of that conversation. So that's one. 2, you need a very good internal structure, because you don't want it like hey, the communications department or this one department works on it, you want this like citywide and you want this to be used for all the topics across the city, so you need a really good internal structure. And thirdly, you need the skills and resources, which is often a challenge because we might underestimate the level of technological proficiency and savviness that is there in the government workforce. We see that it really differs. Sometimes you have very, I'm going to use a bit of a cliche here, but a young and dynamic workforce, and then maybe a slightly, or workforce that is less familiar with technology, and that is also going to impact, you know, the success of those implementations of civic technology. And I think that is one of the big challenges that we need to think about. How do we also get more talent into government? How do we show people in education, in universities, in the high schools, how do we show them that actually through the public sector you can have an immense impact on millions of lives? Because that will be needed so that we have those digital spaces run by the government in the most effective way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is right now, but what are going to be the trends in digital democracies? What do you think about the future?
I mean, lots of people are, of course, talking about artificial intelligence in the.
How is working? Are you implementing it? In
so
CitizenLab?
we are. Because I think we've been talking a lot about how does it happen in the front office, right? Like which kind of topics, which kind of methods, but a very big piece of what we do or why we think our technology can also make a difference is in the back office. So imagine the examples that Wietse mentioned, you're gathering 2,000 ideas or you're getting lots and lots of comments. What I think many governments struggle with is to process all of that input and then to actually also close the feedback loop, because it's not only participation that is important, but it's also about how do you communicate on what's been decided, how do you make sure that people know what's happening. So we have actually since the beginning, we've been working with natural language processing to cluster ideas, to cluster open answers, to see like, okay, what are the different kind of topics. But now, of course, with conversational AI, we can go one step further. We can ask for summaries. The civil servants can ask questions about the data. So what are you seeing? What is this kind of group of people saying differently than this group? So it really helps them to quickly have an insight into what people are saying. So I think that's one big trend, right? How can you leverage artificial intelligence to increase the efficiency of participation or citizen participation? So that's one big one.
And another one is making sure that, you know, as we build those digital democracies, they are inclusive and representative, and that, you know, initially there was a focus on how to get more people online to participate in participatory democracy. Now the question becomes way more like looking at like the diversity of the participants. How do we create a level playing field and like an equal possibility for everyone to participate? So for us, that means that we focus also a lot on the offline, not only on the online. You know, we don't believe in this idea of like we are the app that is going to save democracy. It's about putting an infrastructure out there that helps communities communicate and engage with the governments through their preferred channels. So that can be through an offline event, that can be through like kiosks in the city, that can be through, of course, online, it can be through a neighborhood network or WhatsApp. So we try to kind of combine those different mediums and channels so that we also amplify and that we really expand the reach. Because going back to the challenges, I think that is one of the challenges, and that's why I was referring to that like high politics or big political topics. We are now like at about 5% of the cities, roughly between 5 and 10% that participate on these platforms. So it's pretty good, but it's not like the total mass yet. And I think to get there, we need to think about how do we, you know, work across different medias, but also we need media and press to really talk about that participatory democracy that is already happening today.
And I think there's also a link with the work of Cibervoluntarios, because I know that you're doing like skills building within communities, teaching people on how to on having the digital skills, and that's, I think, what we are also see. We're less active in Spain, but the countries where we are active in, similar kind of organizations will make sure that our tools are used and to educate people on how to use them.
That's it. That we do that, and we do very well.
Yeah.
And but with these kind of technologies, do you think that time? 10 minutes. Okay. Do you think that is working in the same way in small communities, in medium cities, or in big cities? And do you have some examples of a big city that are using this kind of tools, or a small city? Do you think it's working in the same way, or different?
I think there are like there are a few differences. So I think first there's indeed the small big city. Small cities, I think the advantage is that they're also the kind of the civil service is smaller, so often it's like easier to get people on board internally, right? So I think that's like often an advantage. Probably like 60% of the cities that we're working with are small to medium size, so they can quickly launch things, test it. Whereas in big cities, it can have a very big impact. For example, London Borough of Newham, we have, I think, more than 200 internal project managers using it every day, but it takes a long time, and you need to do a lot of change management internally before everyone knows about it. So there's, you can have a very big impact, but it needs a lot of work. And then there's also the difference in regions, in countries. Northern Europe, it's, let's say, the focus is more on the administration, on the civil servants. If you go to Southern Europe, or like, for example, also already for us in France, it becomes much more political. So we feel like the souther you go, the more politicians are involved, and it has both pros and cons. I think the good thing about politicians being involved is that sometimes or often it's about topics that are really important, but then if a politician leaves or is not elected, then there's not the continuity, or there's not maybe the same way of doing things. So yeah, there's always, I think, a bit of differences.
And did you find some local governments that don't want to use this kind of tools to improve the democracies?
No.
When you go over there? No? Really?
Of course, yeah. But I think it starts at the first point of like the political will. Like, it's sharing power, right? Sharing decision-making power. I don't think everyone is ready for that yet. I hope I'm using the word yet, and that is a word. But no, yeah, that is I think the main barrier, that there is not the political will, and I think sometimes it's better not to start with, if there is no will, again, like, it's better not to start instead of starting with something that is meaningless, because that will only decrease the trust of citizens in their government, and it's really important that we use those tools to increase the trust and to actually show that it can be done differently, that you can have an influence on the decisions being made. But so yeah, I would say that is the main barrier. But
we do have seen, for example, when we started 8-9 years ago, and we were going from like town hall to town hall, pitching this, it was more seen as kind of a nice to have, like, okay, it's a nice project. But then, of course, COVID happened, and like cities and governments had to digitize massively. And I do feel that moment has been like a catalyzer for our work, because all of a sudden it was like a need to have. They needed technology. So I think since COVID, it's more and more cities are more open to it, and it's more like, okay, how will we do it? How far will we go? But it's less like the initial convincing. We can still work with politicians that are maybe not so open for it, but then it will be like very safe topics. And then the question is, do we want to do that?
Is this a way to work with politicians?
Say again?
To work with politicians is easy, or I don't know. Here in Spain,
I think what is really important, we typically work with like people from the city administration, but I think what's really important is that it's to see it as a two-way conversation as well, and to also show to political leaders how citizen participation can help them how it can help them better understand like the diversity of the different opinions and the different sentiments in the community, so it can create better policy. So that is the daily battle that we're fighting, and trying to convince them of like why this is very much needed, and they cannot be just taking decisions in their ivory tower.
One more. No, two. One more. Okay, we are going to.
Hello. Very nice project. I would like, the first is a question, very simple question. How can I get in touch with you? Because we have a project on democracy and digital tools, and what you are doing is really great, and I would like to see whether we can have a conversation offline or here later on how to get to know each other. That's one question. And the second question, how do you go about multilinguality? Because obviously Belgium is a multilingual country. Also, you said that you have been implementing in South America, in the Americas, etc. I wonder whether discussions, for example, in Belgium, happen in 2 languages or just restricted to 1 in each case, or how you go about that.
Mm-hmm. So on the first question, yes, let's talk. I think that is one of the main benefits of where digital technology and digital platforms can come in, because you can have in the Belgian context, but not only actually in the Belgian context where you have multiple languages. Yes, you can host this conversation with auto translations, but even if you think about inclusion and equality, in the United States, what's interesting is that governments, it's really a top priority for them, like inclusive participation. And we have, for instance, the city of Seattle, you can engage in 10, 20 languages, Vietnamese and all those, Korean and so on, like there's a big Asian community. So it also enables people who are not native speakers to participate in the debate and still have that conversation directly with others, whereas in an in-person setting that wouldn't be possible. So I think that is also one of the big advantages.
Sí, vale. Yeah, no, I'll do it in English. How many or what percentage of all the municipalities and cities in the world use your platform or a similar platform? And how many do you think would be needed to be able to scale up to regional or even national levels?
That's an interesting question. So in some countries, we see already in Belgium, Netherlands, Denmark, that we're like working with about 25 to 50% of the municipalities. So we are actually start thinking about a question of like, can we from here come to also like something more regional and national? But I think if you would ask me about the global, then probably it's still under 1%. But it's an interesting question, how many cities worldwide would be using platforms today? I think it's also like, brings us to another topic, but there's also the question of like, I think today we would be looking at OECD countries where there is like a democratic culture, because those tools, implementing them in non-democratic cultures is very difficult to build impact. We have tried it, and if there is no culture, you're not gonna, so I cannot give you a percentage on like how many, I don't know if you would have a clue.
Yeah, but I do think like in other parts of the world, of course, there's like civic technology being implemented, but then it's maybe not in the same model as we do it directly with local governments. It's more through NGOs. So I wouldn't have like a perfect view on how many, but I hope at least in every community worldwide there's some technology being used, and we're also seeing that there are great projects in Africa where people are like directly through their smartphones also having a say, but it's not we who build those tools. I also feel that you need to pick your niche and focus on what you do well, and that's what we've been doing over these past few years, like local governments in OECD countries, and then you can start scaling up because it's a solution that can be implemented in different places.
Hi, again.
Hello.
First of all, congratulations for being able to deal with your parenthood and at the same time your entrepreneurial activity. Congratulations. And the question, just I'm going to the point. How do you envision these tools of participatory democracy within an augmented democracy scenario like the one Cesar was describing before?
I think, I mean, I cannot fully kind of refer back to the model Cesar was, because I was struggling with my translations, but I think like, just in general, generative AI, the combination of collective intelligence and artificial intelligence is really promising, because now with generative AI, Aline talked already a little bit about the sense-making product that we have developed to really, there's a lot of textual input in participation and engagement to make sense out of it and to understand really the opinions in real time within a community is super promising. But I think there's more applications that in which like this technology can be used to bring communities to a deliberation, to a consensus. That's something, there's two applications that we're currently looking into. One is more on can an AI agent be a facilitator in online conversations? So can we use it actually to summarize debates, to point to arguments, to actually bring a group to group decisions and to consensus? Another thing is in, again, local government. So a lot is placemaking, a lot is urban planning. A lot is about, hey, let's reconstruct the park or the street or that neighborhood. So the whole imagining exercise today is very textual, and it's a burden for some people to participate, that it's so textual, because you need to already be pretty well educated. And we're looking into how can AI be used to also create more visual models so that we can translate ideas into visuals and actually work together on visuals to envision those spaces, to make it more inclusive. So those are just for us two specific applications that we're looking into around AI. And I would love also, by the way, to connect with people who are working on this topic, on AI in digital democracy, because I think it's such an amazing space, and I would love to kind of also hear about others' work in this space.
Hello. So my question was, I don't really know much about your company, but I wanted to know if your platform is open source or is it totally closed source?
Yeah, it is open source. More specifically, I mean, we do have an open core model because, as I said at the start, we are a social profit. We have a business model. We are an independent company. The large majority of the code is open source. And then there are some parts that are under a commercial license. But all the code is open code, so the source code is always open. But again, like 80% is open source, and then about 20% is under a commercial license. And those 20% actually, our business model consists in the fact that those 20% are really the enterprise functionalities to help governments be more efficient and so on. So that's the idea behind it. The AGPL, sorry, I got to think about the AGPL license.
Okay, the last question. I don't know if you know that they are in the Forbes list under 30. And my question is, do you have something with number 3? Or do you like number 3 for what?
Yeah, that's a long time ago. No. Yeah, so we came. We're not only business partners, we're also life partners, and now partners in parenthood. So we became parents of 3 girls. They're now 8 months.
I would love really a huge shout out to the people from Cibervoluntarios, because they made this possible for us to. We are here with the whole family, with the 5 of us plus our nanny, and I find it just amazing and super inclusive that you guys sponsored that for us and make it happen.
We appreciate so much, because we know that it's very difficult to travel around with this big and awesome family. Yeah. And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
And the CitizenLab is growing up. the project
Yeah, exactly.
with more people. Thank you very much for being Malaga with us. Thanks a lot.
Thank
so
you.
much.